One. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Advisor. My name is Lisa Urbanski, co-host of the show, and today's guest is Kevin Helman. So he knows this world better than most with over 25 years in pitch consulting. 25 years in pitch consulting. So he knows that area better than anyone else. So he has spanned billion-dollar deals, thousands of professionals coached in high pressure moments across every major industry. He has seen what works and, more importantly, in that industry, what doesn't. Trained early in his career by one of the top pitch consulting firms and later serving as the head pitch coach for the Big Four HR consulting giant, Kevin has turned the art of pitching into a science. His real world results driven approach helps teams cut through the noise, craft strategy driven stories, and deliver with confidence when it matters most. So, if you've ever wondered how great communicators rise under pressure or how to turn a good pitch into a winning one, this podcast series is your roadmap. Before we get started, I want to thank Spreaker and iHeartRadio for your sponsorship. We appreciate you. And to our listeners, please do not forget to like and subscribe before you jump off the show. Um, Today, we're going to talk to Kevin and we're going to get his story and later dive into the pitching and what he's doing in this business world. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good, good. And so you're coming in from Toronto, Canada.
Yep. We're just digging ourselves out of the snow here. No, I'm just kidding. It's pretty nice right now, but yeah, Toronto, Canada.
Toronto, Canada. Yeah. Well, I'm in Winnipeg. So we literally, I feel like it went from winter to summer overnight.
Right. Yeah, I
It's
bet.
amazing. Well, thanks for being here. And I know we talked about, we're going to dive into your story a little bit and what brought you into this industry, where you've come from. And you've come a long way because before we hit record, you were telling me about your time in the UK. Is that where you were born?
Yeah, born in London, England. Actually, Wimbledon, about a mile from Centre Court, and then sort of moved to North London. But yeah, I'm a Londoner by heart, and I moved to Canada in 1995 for work.
Okay. And so what were you doing in the UK?
So in the UK, I was in I guess we call it investment banking. I was started off as a stockbroker. I tried to do that. Funnily enough, my first day once qualified was October 19th, I believe it was, 1987, which was the stock market crash. So that was my first exposure to clients on that fun day. And I sort of weaved around in being a stockbroker, and it was a little bit slow for me. So then I actually got into the bond market. I was kind of fixated on financial services stuff. So I got into the bond market and ended up working for a Canadian bond brokerage. And so I worked for them in London, and ended up running their Eurobond desk. And I was asked if I would consider coming to Toronto. And I used to come to Toronto maybe once a year. And I loved Toronto. And I had a very young family, had a baby at 6 months. And they said, let's go for a year or two, see how you like it, and then come back to the UK. And I'm still in Canada, and that was 1995. So that's kind of how I made the jump. My mum is still not very pleased with me over that. Said, don't
Yeah,
worry, I'll
I
be back in
bet.
a year. Yeah.
That's
Took her
funny.
first grandchild away. So she's not, yeah. She is speaking to me though.
Wow. So you're a numbers guy.
Well, I kind of, not really. I'm more of a people guy. And, in that business, the numbers definitely matter, but I was more on the client relationship side. So I was managing some of the firm's relationships,
Okay.
some of their sort of key accounts. And so my clients were probably more the numbers guy than I was. I would just move their stuff around for them. But it was very much a relationship based business back then, as even what stockbroker, being a stockbroker, you're managing people's money, but they still care, who their advisor is, and you still care who
Hmm.
your clients is. So even though, it sounds very technical, it's actually very much a relationship business.
Yeah, I feel like everything is, right?
So far, what I've seen, it tends to be, yeah. Unless you're sitting in a cubicle and don't talk to anybody at all. There's there's inter-office relationships there, but most of it seems to be relationship based for sure.
So you brought your family to Toronto in 1995.
Yeah. 1995, set up here and remained in the bond business for about 16 more years here. And, I used to have a lot of hair back then and be a lot taller. And I realized that if I keep doing that, keep in this business, I'm going to have less and less hair and continue to shrink. I always laugh about that. And I was ready to try something different. I was early 40s, but I just felt something was missing. I thought the industry was getting automated anyway. So I thought I'm still young enough. And somebody a good friend of mine was trying to woo me across to the consulting side. And they worked for sort of a business performance consulting firm, small but global, who focused on two key areas for business performance, which was leadership development and sales execution, which I didn't even know what that was at the time. But they said that 75% of their clients were in the financial services industry, the investment banks, and they had a little bit of a challenge delivering a lot of their solutions and even selling into some of these places because you need credibility in that industry, and they didn't really have
Right.
it. So is this something that I would consider? I had a background in client relationship management. I've been selling since I was probably 13 years old, if I'm honest. And I think
What were you selling at 13 years old?
I used to work in an outdoor market on a Sunday out in actually Wembley Stadium. They used to have the largest outdoor market in Europe, and I used to sell sweatshirts and T-shirts for my uncle on a Saturday to earn a little bit of money. So dealing with the public,
You were just
that was
good
I
at
think
it.
my first interaction with selling. Um, so where was I? I was oh yes. So they approached me and asked, would I be interested in the consulting world? I really didn't know what that meant, and so they asked me, well, look, why don't you come to some of our sessions and see the intellectual property that we have, and they were really helping with sales training and sales performance and everything that goes into that. So I thought to myself, what have I got to lose? And I sat through a couple of sessions, actually with one was a huge consumer packaged goods company, and the other one was one of the big banks here in Canada. And I absolutely loved what they were doing. These sessions were, I couldn't get enough of it. So I was like, okay, sign me up. I think I want to do this. So then I went to work for them, and I got trained in all the aspects and the approaches around sales execution, leadership. And part of that was the pitch consulting side of the business. This organization is very well known for handling 4 Olympic pitches: Sydney, London, Vancouver, and New York. And they won 3 of 4. So a 75% success rate on Olympic pitches, which are billions and billions of dollars,
Gosh,
is
wow.
kind of unheard of.
That's
So
unreal.
yeah, and it's the same types of frameworks and approach, and it was codified, but yet there's other places that are sort of best practices that are pulled in, and so learning a lot of these approaches kind of got me hooked on, wow, there's actually a science behind some of these things.
Yes.
Now there's a lot of art to it as well, which is it's kind of like, well, it depends. Somebody may ask a question and you're like, well, it kind of depends, and that's the challenge with pitching a little bit. But there are certain things that are irrefutable, I believe, in the pitch process, and if you deviate from them, your chances of success, I think, go down, and if you stick to them, your chances of success go up. So I was both selling while at this company the solutions and the services, and I was also delivering them. So I was spending a lot of time with the Wall Street banks, from analyst all the way up to MD level, all types of sessions, whether it be sales, whether it be leadership, business strategy, effective communication, business presentation skills, all of these types of things were solutions that, I would go in, fly in for the day or 2 days, do sessions, and then fly back out again.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I cut my teeth on a lot of these things, and I just took to it like a duck to water, and then I just
Yeah.
started, reading more and more and more, and looking at different ways of doing these things. And so I worked for them, and then I was approached by one of my clients, and I was training their sales force, actually, one of the big HR firms, consulting firms, big company, 50,000 employees. I was working with them, and they said, "Well, why are we paying this company when we could just pay you? So would you like to come and work for us and take on, a role that we'll figure out for you, probably around sales enablement, sales leadership?" And I said yes, because while I liked the consulting side of the house, one thing was the challenging is you sort of parachute in, then you kind of parachute out again.
Right.
You don't really get to see it all come to fruition. And I was ready to actually, if I could try and turn teams around or results around, I wanted to stay there and make sure that happened. So that took me into the professional services firm, more into a sales leader type role, sales enablement, sales effectiveness, whatever you want to call it, role. And I was there for 10 years, and then I progressed to head of sales and growth for the investment line of the practice of this company. And again, after about 10, 11 years of that, figured I wanted time to go alone again. So that's kind of where my journey took me. It's a bit all over the place. It wasn't where I
We learned
thought
a
I
few
would be.
things. We learned that you pulled your hair out because of the bond business.
Yeah, it claims that. Yeah,
Yeah. We learned that your mother is still mad at you.
yeah,
And we also learned that you're now like on your own doing this work that you love to do so much. You have so much experience in. So tell us about that.
sure. So I went back to. I'm going to go back to the consulting. I had a pretty good network, and working in a corporate environment has its own dynamics.
Yeah.
And if you're entrepreneurial, it's not that at all.
Hmm.
Slow decisions. And I was, again, at my age, I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. Thankfully, I didn't need to. But it was like, how do I want to make a difference and do something that I'm still passionate about? So I wanted to go back into being just a dedicated pitch consultant, not do any of the other stuff, just help organizations or individuals fix their pitch process, because it's not hard to fix a pitch process. And I think people think they have a pitch process, but they don't really. Or help people with specific pitches, like a must-win battle or a must-win pitch that can change a company's year around, or even a company around, if they can win a certain contract at some sort of level. So that's what I wanted to do. And I was building my business around that. And then I got to realize, Lisa, that it's a lot of really hard work working with individual clients, which is great, but it's really hard to scale. And so I wouldn't feel comfortable working with even two clients at once is a challenge. It can be done and you can do a good job, but it's, again, what hair I do have will be gone for sure.
Is that
So
because there's two separate artistic kind of paths? Is that what you mean by that? Because there's two competing, you're creating two different pitches. So you have to explain that. Why would it be hard
yeah,
to work
that's
with
a
two
good
clients?
question. Less that, more the effort that goes into working on a singular pitch and the time that
Got it.
is required. And so if it means that I'm going to work with somebody sometimes the time frame is very, very short. Most people don't have the foresight to say, hey, we're going to respond to this RFP or this proposal or this opportunity, and we've got 3 months. Let's strategically work on that. I wish I got phone calls like that. There are usually phone calls along the lines of, we have just made the finalist of this opportunity and we have to pitch next Friday. That's what I
Yeah.
usually get, which, I get it, but it's like, oh my goodness, I wish you would have called me 3 weeks ago.
Right.
And it depends. If something is a $50 million pitch, you should have called 3 weeks ago. If something is smaller, maybe it's $50,000 or $100,000, still a lot of money. Maybe we can do and be effective quicker.
Mhm.
So usually it's a bit of a firestorm. And so when you have two of those, there's just not enough hours in the day because
Right.
you're meeting with the team, you're building the strategy, trying to understand all of the buyers, all the dynamics, all of that good stuff, emotional, rational needs, linking it to solutions. Really things that most people don't do in the beginning. They usually go straight to solutions. And
Hmm.
then this is how we're going to talk about them. And it's kind of backwards. And so when you take them through that process, there's a little bit of effort, actually quite a lot of effort in the beginning. And then it makes the back end so much easier. And so the effort just shifts. And so when you have two of those, it's just because when you sort of get in the room, sometimes you don't know what you're going to get.
Hmm.
This is also sort of the issue. So I would just really want to work with one at a time, maybe two, depending on the pitches, and how many how big the teams are. Is it a team of two? Is it a team of 10?
Hmm.
How long is the pitch? Is it? Uh, I'm doing one right now. It's a 20-minute pitch, and one before that was a 4-hour pitch. And so very very very
Wow.
different in the outcomes or the approach.
Do you want
So
to
yeah,
do you want to explain what some of the pitches that you've done were for? Like you say 4 hour pitch, what was that for?
so those are usually the consulting firms. Well, anybody who usually has um, more than one solution tied together. So
Mm.
back in the HR consulting days, certainly in the investments side where I used to work, you may have an investment side of the pitch, but then you may have an actuarial side of the pitch. It will be a pension that's maybe looking for investment strategy and pension strategy that ties
Mm.
together their pension money. But you need actuaries to figure out, well, what's your strategy? Because you need to fund it to pay your
Right.
retirees, and that's all on actuarial science. And then you have, well, then what does that make the portfolio look like? That's the investment practice. And then you can have all other types of solutions that are bolted to that. So you can have 5 or 6 people in the room pitching different solutions that are all really part of one. So when you have
Got it.
those, the decision makers on the other end may be a committee, and so you'll go through each part of those. The shorter ones may be, for instance, an asset manager is pitching their funds to whoever. It could be to an investment advisor, it could be to a family office, high net worth clients, could be to consultants. And so that may be a relatively short pitch. That could be 15 minutes, right? Tell us
Right.
about your fund, why we should pick it. So those,
Hmm.
those would be two examples of long pitches versus short pitches.
Why don't you tell us about some of your proudest pitch moments?
Wow. I think there's one that always comes to mind, and it was actually a renewal. So it was an existing client of a firm that was basically going to walk out the door. They were ready to lead. They had a new decision maker who was very, very different, thought about things very, very different than the incumbent decision makers, and had articulated some dissatisfaction, not necessarily with the company, the incumbent, but just with the whole approach, the whole industry, the whole approach. And it was more of I don't want to call it a battle, but it came down to, well, what's the strategy for what are we going to do with this pitch? One person was saying we need to educate these individuals or this individual into this is actually how this business is, because they came from different industries. I think they were parachuted in to say, take care of this. And this was huge. I mean, it was um, several tens of millions of dollars of contract value. And that walking out the door isn't what you want to hear. And so when it came
Right.
down to it, there was two schools of thought. There was a school of thought which is they're not really educated on how this business works. Let's educate them on how this business works. And there was the other school of thought which is, well, they're actually not wrong. Now, how we do it may be challenging, but And they're actually what they're saying is not wrong. And I think if you try to educate them, because there's this whole thing around challenger sale and challenging,
Right.
clients around their thinking, which I buy into. I do. However, there's a time when that's not going to work with certain individuals and certain personalities. And
Hmm.
when I was unpacking the decision maker, I was very much on one side of that argument, and it came down to a bit of a sort of a standoff between, because they were so binary, they were so opposite.
Right.
One was, let's take them into have a coffee with them and try to educate them and persuade them why they're wrong. And mine was, actually, no, I think they're right, and it's going to cost us quite a bit of money to invest in showing them that they're right, and we can help them get there. And I'm talking about several hundred thousands of dollars in
Right.
investment into that versus the other one. So anyway, long story
So just
long,
pocket change. Just kidding.
yeah, it was, there was, I'm going to go out and hire an external consultant because of the bench
Yeah.
strength that we needed for it. And to really, without getting too specific into the details, really show them and change their mind around their perception of us, because their perception
Hmm.
of us was one way. And it actually wasn't actually a reality. So it came to a conversation with, I think, me and my boss, and it was well, I think we should go this way, and I think we should go that way. And the conversation was, well, okay, we'll go. And he was a good friend, and I loved him dearly. And he was like, well, okay, listen, we'll do it your way, but if it doesn't work, it's going to be down to you. And I remember thinking, it was a Friday night, and I may have had a glass of wine at the time, because I think he was calling me from an airport after meeting with this person, saying, this is what we need to do. And I was like, I don't know, I don't think so. This guy, and we had that conversation, and it was okay, just know that if this goes wrong, your head's on the line.
Right.
And I was
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
okay, that's fine. And so I got to give this guy credit. He got the check signed. Whatever you need, let's go do it. And it was really quite the event, and quite the uh, I guess I'll say the story, because I don't think it's a very conservative firm, and I don't think that all of us kind of were like, where are we going to pull this from? It doesn't. We have
Right.
to create this from scratch. And kudos to everyone we did. Uh, and so we pulled off, again, it's tough to go into too much of the specifics. So I don't want to give names away and confidentiality on this stuff, but it was really quite the production. And it's not just to put a production on for production's sake, but it was about changing this person's mind, who, by the way, their boss had written. So the CEO and they're a global Fortune 50 company. Their CEO was talking about how vendors need to be this way. And so it trickled down to this person who was really drinking that Kool-Aid.
Right.
And so
Hmm.
we had to now, and we weren't that way at all. We were almost like old school. So bringing them and converting that into them walking away from this meeting. And that's really, when you think about a pitch, I always, like to ask people, well, what's the objective of your pitch? What do you want people to think, feel, know, and do
Hmm.
as a result of
Hmm.
what you're going to say? So we wanted them to think something very, very bold and change their minds, and feel this way, do this, and all these types of things. And we pulled it off, and it took
Wow.
that took 18 months from
Wow.
start to
That's
finish.
that's a long time.
A lot of hours, of hours of sleepless nights, and multi-team. There were so many people involved that
That's
really
incredible.
grounded to a success. And then when we got that win, that was just pretty, I'd say, career defining, because you kind of know if this goes sideways, it's going to be down to you, because you made a call. But I felt there it was the right thing to do, and I was just glad that we pulled it off. And they're still a client of
Yeah.
that company 5 years later, so it's good.
Talk about validation, confidence boost, all the things, right? Made that glass of wine taste really, really good.
Oh, well, yeah, after 18 months later, it absolutely it did. So yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It's validation because it's common sense and it's sometimes it's, I shouldn't say it's common sense. It's just conviction. People,
Yeah.
we're all people, we know what we like and what we want to see and what we want to hear and what we want to feel. And I just find sometimes we just get away from that in sales and
hmm
pitching. We get into the
hmm
data and the information and try and let that do its job. It doesn't work.
No, you're right. So talk to us. You mentioned way at the beginning of this episode about common misconceptions about pitching that people make, that you can, usually point out when you're working with a client. What are some of those common mistakes that people use when they're creating their pitch?
Uh, Great question. I would say the number one thing that people usually do is they go straight to the materials and the deck. So they'll go straight to the presentation and it'll be like, let's start putting this thing together.
hmm
And that's far too premature in my experience. Even if you know what, exactly what you want to pitch and say, which I would then argue, well, how would you know it unless you really know who you're talking to and the audience. And so that's usually where people will start. It's the easiest place for people to start because they're starting on a place that they're familiar with.
Right.
So that's usually the sort of the first problem that people have, and then they work backwards. And so when you work on your presentation, your deck, and materials, you're very, very internally focused. You're thinking about what we want to say. Even if you ask people, well, no, we're focusing on the client or the prospect or whoever it is that we're trying to pitch to. It's still done from a very internal perspective, and it becomes a very much like a bad date. A bad date is probably somebody who just doesn't stop talking about themselves. I feel like I'm being a bad
hmm
dad. I'm doing nothing to talk about myself right now, but
it's all about you
it's
right now. It's all
right.
about you.
It's all about me. And it's kind of they just want to talk and they just want to tell you all the great things I've done. And if you look at most people's decks, it's we have 60,000 employees, we have
Yeah.
offices all around the world. Look at all the awards we've won. Again, it's like a bad day. It's like great, and then as soon as somebody talks on the other side, they're just trying to ram down affirmation so they can say stuff that they want to
Yeah.
get out. And so it's very one-sided, and I find that that's not a very very good approach, and prospects can sniff that stuff out very very quickly. So most
hmm
people, the biggest issue is to start where there's a lot of unknown, and the way there's a lot of unknown generally is around the buyers. And
Right.
so if it's like, okay, great, let's go and define a strategy for the pitch, which is quite simply answering one question, which is if the client asked you, well, why should I choose you versus the other five that I have coming in right after you,
hmm
what would you say? And that's usually the problem. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's an investment advisor, works for one of the banks, and I said, "How do you respond to that?" So when somebody calls you up or you get a lead and it's a high net worth client, they've just sold their business for $25 million. Now they're looking for estate planning, investment advice, whatever. You get this call, but right behind you are all the other banks, probably a dozen of them. Let's just say there's five of them who all do exactly the same thing that you
Right.
do. And so this person sits you down, and before you get out your materials, because I said, I guarantee you have a brochure. And he's like, of course we do. It's like, that's fine. Everyone needs that. But I said, if they asked you, why would I choose you versus anybody else? What would you say? And most people pause there, or what they'll say will be the same thing over and over again. But I sort of respond to that the reason that somebody chooses you should probably be different each time because
hmm
they have different needs than everybody else.
I was just
So,
thinking that. Right.
right? So if you say, well, because we give the best investment advice, do you? Like, really? You're
Yeah.
going to expect me to believe that? If I stack your performance up against everybody else's, Is it really that much better? Because if it were, there'd be no conversation.
Right.
Number one.
So, so does it have to be personal and authentic? Is that what you're saying? Like personal and authentic to each situation. So it changes for each person.
Exactly. This is why I'm not a massive proponent of value props or corporate value props. So I used to have a boss who used to say to me, "We need better value props. We need better value props." Kind of used to drive me bonkers because it's like I'll develop a value prop when I'm sitting down or I've uncovered the buyers that we're talking to.
What does that
Because
mean
to,
to the people who are listening who don't know what that term means? Value prop?
Sorry, yeah. So value proposition. So if somebody was to ask you, what is it that you do
Oh,
different or better that you're going to give me? So, a value proposition may be um, we have 5 times more portfolio managers than anybody else in the industry. That would be considered a value proposition,
right.
for
Okay.
instance. Okay, great. That's just a case in point. But and if you look on marketing materials, and the reason that you have these value propositions are usually they're done for marketing. So marketers have a very difficult job. Their job is to market companies. So when people go on websites or they read brochures or they want to get high level information, you can get a 30,000-foot view of a company. Here's what we
Right.
do. Here's who we do it for. Here's our value propositions. We have 27 more lawyers than anybody else. We have 50 more years of experience in litigating these cases. These are all value propositions. They're very generic, and so they're required at the marketing level. When you're pitching and you're selling, they do you a lot of damage, I think, because when
Mhm.
I hear them, if I'm on the other end of them, they're so generic and they don't mean
Right.
anything. It's kind of like, so what? So what does that get me? So you've got 50 more lawyers than anybody else. So I guess I have to
Yeah.
pay. Do I have to pay for that? Is that what I'm paying
Hmm.
for? You understand? So it's very much it's too high level. So when you're sitting in front of a client, so from the investment advisor perspective, if you're sitting in front of a client, somebody asks, "Well, why would I choose you?" Maybe a better, I mean, just stuff pops into my brain. A better response is, "I don't know yet because I don't know what your specific needs are. That's why I'm here."
Exactly.
That may be a better response than, "I could tell you we have the best performance and our fees. It's all the same. It's
Hmm.
about you and me. It's about, I need to understand what you want from an investment
Hmm.
advisor, what your conception of preconceived notion of an investment advisor relationship is. What's your history? Have you had bad examples or good examples? What do you think the good and the bad? Let's try and just figure out what it is that this person wants, then build your pitch around their needs. Um,
Hmm.
so that's more of the mindset. Now, a lot of companies don't have a chance to do that because they get into these pitching factories.
Hmm.
So a lot of the companies I work for, we're doing 4 or 5 pitches a week sometimes.
Right.
So it's very, very difficult to get the amount of time that's required to be really, really efficient, especially when you don't have a pitching process.
Right.
Because what people will, going back to your original question, default to is, "Oh, I don't have very much time because I've got 2 pitches I got to put together. So let me go get this deck and presentation that I did for XYZ. I'm going to take out XYZ and I'm going to put in ABC and change the names
Right.
and a little bit about him. I'm going to punt that off and present it." That also doesn't work.
Hmm. But yeah, absolutely. It has to be so personal, and it is. It sounds like such a fine art that you've mastered, right? So what do you do? Like, what are the first couple steps
So for
in
me,
your
it's
process?
yeah. So there are 3 stages that everybody really needs to unpack, and they're pretty simple. The first is the strategy, the pitch strategy, which is answering the question of why would we choose you? Or I think I said last time when I was talking with Stacey, it was if you think about it in terms of, if you have won this pitch, we're pitching to Lisa, and we're trying to figure out how are we going to pitch whatever it is that we're pitching to Lisa. I would probably ask the group, okay, imagine that we've pitched to Lisa and Lisa has called and said that you've won. Okay. Or even better, Lisa had made the decision that you'd won, and Lisa's boss asked Lisa, hey, did you make a decision on this pitch? Have you chosen somebody? And Lisa said, yes, I chose this group. Oh, that's interesting. Why did you choose them, Lisa? So you said to your boss, well, I chose them because, and then everything that comes after the word because is what you should be building your strategy around. You've got to try and think about, well, why would Lisa choose us? And what you generally don't hear when you do this exercise is, well, we were the cheapest, or we just had the best solution. That's not quite usually good enough, right? It's like, oh, because she liked us. We really built great rapport and chemistry with the team. She totally trusted us. And you can unpack some of those. So we have to figure out, who is Lisa? How does Lisa like to communicate? Is she high level? Is she detail oriented? What's compelling in her decision? Like, what is she really looking for over and above all of the stuff that's in a contract?
Right.
Because you don't win on that, because unless you're so head and shoulders above everybody else with a solution, and if you are, you've won anyway, and you probably won't need to worry about your win rates. But 90% of businesses' win rates are between 25 and 35%. Think about that.
Wow.
Generally in B2B, they're not winning, like basically 1 in 3 they're winning. So that's, whereas elite sales pitching is around 70-75% win rate. Huge
Okay.
difference. So
That is a huge
unpacking,
difference.
yeah. And they do the work around unpacking the buyer, their emotional needs and rational needs. That's where most of the work goes into, if I'm honest. Let's really spend some time there on understanding that. Now we can build the story. So if I've figured out Lisa is big picture, pretty expressive, high energy, not really into too much detail. This is what she really values in this situation. She wants responsiveness. She doesn't want to be left out in the cold. Maybe there's 3 things that are really important to her. Great. Now that's our strategy built. This is what we think, what's going to sway Lisa's decision. That's your strategy done. The second piece is now the story. So what would be the best way to tell that story to Lisa? So what's the framework that I want to use? And that will go to, okay, if it's a 10-minute pitch, we can use, and there's lots of different story frameworks, hero's journey, and there's lots and lots of them. But there's shorter ones, longer ones. There's ones that create more emotion. There's ones that produce a little bit, they're better for data flow. So now let's pick the best way to tell this story so Lisa can understand it. So Lisa walks away totally understanding, these were the top 3 things. I got it. The story made sense. It had a beginning, it had a middle, it had an end. It wasn't all over the place, which is usually what happens when you present a deck. It's all over the place. It's too much data. People don't remember data. The old adage, people don't remember what you say, they remember how you make them feel. And so how do we do that? By telling this story and connect it to the solutions. And then there's the delivery part. So now let's rehearse. The more important your pitch is, the more rehearsal is required. And this is where people usually don't spend a lot of time. So let's rehearse the delivery, because you can have the best strategy, but if you can't tell the story, that's a problem. You can have the best strategy and a really good story, but if you don't deliver it properly in the way that is congruent, you're kind of screwed a little bit too. So having all 3, sit down and think about strategy from the prospect's perspective. Why would they choose us really? How do we tell that in a compelling story that's clear and easy to understand? And then how do we deliver it in a way that makes sense to that person? And again, sparks those emotions, confidence, trust. It doesn't have to be a big production, but it has to exude whatever it is that you're trying to exude.
Right. It has to be effective.
Has to be effective, exactly. Because again, if your delivery is off, everything else kind of goes out the window. So you really do need all 3.
Totally.
You can get away with average 3. You can't get away with a poor in any one of those. Because if you go back afterwards and you're doing your sort of debriefs or your win-loss data, usually when you go and unpack losses, I've seen it in all areas. I'd say the number one area when I go back and I look at losses, it's usually because you have the wrong strategy. Okay, didn't know enough
Okay.
about the buyer. We assumed these things. We thought this was important. It wasn't. Okay, it's better to lose with the wrong strategy than no strategy.
Right.
Um, and then by the way, most of the wins are usually because of the strategy. So
Mm,
um, yeah, so strategy is usually number one, and then the delivery and the story are about equal because you can again we didn't tell the story, they didn't get it, it was too much information, or it wasn't enough information, or somebody somewhere in the pitch was, I don't know, picking their nose, not looking at the camera, checking their watch, were yawning, they just were monotone, whatever it may be.
mhm,
um, that happens as well, and that can kill a pitch
mm.
again right away. So
Totally.
yeah, so those are the three stages that if you're really thinking about a pitch, break them down into those, and you can't go wrong. But you have to do them in that sequential order. You can't change the order. Can't do story then strategy. You have to do strategy. Why would they choose us?
Greatest story.
How do we tell it? Tell it right.
Amazing. So, Kevin, do you want to tell us where we can find you, your website, the services that you provide?
Absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, Kevin Helman. And that's probably the best way. Just reach out on LinkedIn.
Right.
That's the best way. And I know we're going to be talking again. So, how I'm actually starting a company that's going to be doing this by using AI now.
Oh, yes. I'm excited for that for sure. We can't spill too
I am
much
too.
right now.
No, that's fine. We'll save that for next time. That's the next chapter, which is super exciting. Yeah.
Amazing. AI is just changing the whole world, hey?
It is. It is. But it's not, I'm not looking to replace jobs here. I'm not going to help people save time with this stuff. But anyway, we'll talk about that next time.
Next episode. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today. Is there any last
Pleasure.
minute thoughts you want to leave the audience?
No, not really. Just if you are pitching, just enjoy it. I know it's tough and it's hard, but enjoy it. And you can go to my website, helmanpitchconsulting.com. I forgot about that. And there's some quick tips and stuff on there as well. And you can reach me through there as well. But just enjoy it. It should be enjoyable. And hope everyone
Awesome.
has a great summer after this winter, so or spring.
Yes, yes. Well, we're pretty much neighbors, so we'll check up
Yep,
on each other.
exactly. Look forward to it.
Awesome. To our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We are so excited to come back in the next episode and talk to you more about, AI and sales pitching. And Kevin is just such a wealth of information. So until next time, I'm Lisa Urbanski with The Advisor. Bye.